The month of May in Japan during 2023 saw two films featuring car drivers as their main characters. The action-adventure movie Fast 10 and a film from France that was anything but fast and furious, UNE BELLE COURSE. Unlike a film like Fast 10 where just about every character in the film is after the same thing in one way or another, UNE BELLE COURSE is mostly about two characters whose needs are very different, but during the time they spend together, they develop an understanding of each other that becomes a deep relating rather than a relationship, and because of it, their respective worlds become better for it. Directed by Christian Carion and written by Cyril Galli and Christian Carion, starring Lynn Renault and Danny Boone, the French title for the film is UNE BELLE COURSE, direct translation in English being A Beautiful Ride, the English title for the film being Driving Madeline, and the Japanese title is Paris Taxi, which translated in English is Paris Taxi. To enjoy a glimpse of Paris is one of the attractions of this film. UNE BELLE COURSE is a film that is gorgeous on a cinema screen inside a movie theater, but in terms of writing, UNE BELLE COURSE is a fine example of crafting a story about the random people we meet in our lives and the lasting impact they have on us despite sharing only a brief moment in time together. And it's also a fine example of how relating with people rather than having a relationship with people that is fixated on role expectations builds a deeper connection that is more fulfilling than any relationship could ever be. Simply put, the story centers around Charles, a man who makes a living as a taxi driver in the city of Paris, and his patron in this story, an elderly woman, Madeleine, who wants to see the places in the city that meant a lot to her before finally moving into a retirement home. Charles, impatient, skeptical, and disillusioned with life. Madeleine, an elderly woman whose warmth belies her shocking past. Together, for only a day, through the streets of Paris, they build a friendly bond between them with profound effects on each other. Fast and Furious, this is not. And the film's harsh realities of family, relationships, romance, and aging go beyond the idealistic fantasies of the aforementioned action franchise. This was a film that had me thinking of this Japanese saying, Aita kuchi ni bota mochi. It's not just a reflection of the film itself, but it is a saying that is a good reminder for any of us as we take this beautiful ride called life. More on this later. Juggling the different tones of the film, going through the passage of time from war-torn France during World War II to the present day, navigating through drama and comedy, violence and tenderness, past and present, left the narrative thread stitched together somewhat loosely. Yet, UNE BELLE COURSE handled the difficult task of juggling different threads in three separate stories with relative grace and ease. On the one hand was Madeleine's story, which is told in flashbacks, moving through her lifetime as a young woman dealing with domestic violence, then as a middle-aged mother trying to reconnect with her son after her incarceration from ultimately dealing with her abusive partner to protect her son, and then as an elderly woman preparing for the twilight of her years. Then, on the other hand, was Charles's story, his present-day life told mostly in conversations over the phone with members of his family, showing the audience his difficulty in balancing the demands of his professional and personal lives, and his shifting of priorities throughout their journey to accommodate Madeleine's requests. Their stories were then weaved into the tapestry of the third and immediate story of their ride through Paris, before their inevitable parting of ways at the end of this journey. Putting an odd couple together with their own stories and making a story of their own, like this story in UNE BELLE COURSE, would be a challenge for any writer. There was, however, something happening in the film that could be regarded as a technique that helped put these two characters and their stories together, and that was treating the city they both lived in as a character in itself, as a means of stitching their different stories together. One exemplary scene had our odd couple hold up traffic while taking time for a pit stop in order for Madeline to take a visit to a restaurant toilet. It's this kind of setup that can lay the foundation for some great comedy, but it also helped to bring our odd couple together as they stood together in the face of an angered crowd, of their own making, it should be added. But to see them share a laugh afterwards, it's hard to not laugh with them and congratulate them on their act of comedic defiance and shared moment of happiness. Paris, as both observer of Charles and Madeline, as well as observed by Charles and Madeline, Paris acted like a character in itself through its inhabitants becoming unwitting participants and recipients to this odd couple's course through the city, by reacting to their misadventures on their way to their final destination. Much of the film's comedy came from this dynamic as the city and our odd couple took turns at being an obstacle to the other. It's nothing unlike any of us who live in a big city has ever been through, but how often do we take the time to laugh at ourselves and the predicaments we happen ourselves into? With Madeline's story of fighting through and fighting against domestic violence, and Charles's story of marital, parental, and financial difficulties, I think this is where a subtle pattern arises that brings to the surface the inherent problems that come with relationships, rather than relating. Most people choose relationships rather than relating because the roles we play in relationships gives us a level of certainty that we falsely depend on for security. In relating, however, there is no fixed image of a person we demand the other to fit into. We treat people as things in relationships, but we are on a more beautiful ride of discovery through relating, as there is no fixed, frozen image of the other that we demand for out of our own insecurities and societal expectations. That may be going too far into the film's cultural and psychological levels, and the film was perhaps more concerned with showcasing the charisma and beauty of the setting, its characters and the wonderful actors who played them. But in terms of writing and cinema viewing, UNE BELLE COURSE is a great alternative to the big noisy Hollywood productions like the Fast and Furious franchise, as well as being much more satisfying in its emotional, cultural, and human portrayals. In contrast to the Fast and Furious films, even the James Bond films, and most recently The Gray Man, where the locations are only backdrops to only give the feeling of internationalization rather than actually being international. UNE BELLE COURSE uses its setting more as a character rather than a backdrop on large and personal scales. It's something that I think as writers we can utilize to explore the internal as well as external worlds of all the characters in our stories. If the aim of the film was to showcase Paris as a city to visit or to live, as well as starting conversations about acts of violence in domestic settings, then it worked at least on this member of the audience. UNE BELLE COURSE became more than just a title for a film for me. It was the spirit of a city I look forward to visiting one day, and an attitude about people and about life to further champion. Thank you for making it this far into the video, where we'll finish with the Japanese saying mentioned earlier, Aitakuchi ni botamochi. Like the happenstance of Charles and Madeline's meeting. In life as well as in a film like UNE BELLE COURSE, both are much like this Japanese saying, Aitakuchi ni botamochi, which in English can be translated as an unexpected windfall, a sudden gain. Literally, it means a bean jam cake falling into an open mouth. As a half-centenarian myself, I can attest to windfalls and gains happening suddenly and unexpectedly. You can't make it happen, it just does. But having the kind of attitude like Madeline and the empathy and kindness of both Madeline and Charles, unexpected windfalls and sudden gains can make its way to you via a beautiful ride, or as they say in French, UNE BELLE COURSE.